Hello everyone, this is a compilation of all my previous videos discussing what if the different UCN characters were in Ultimate Custom Night. And as well, I'll be adding a few characters who weren't here because I just simply forgot them before. So yes, jerakaigamez is in this video. I'm making this mainly because the next few videos are super long and quite frankly, I need a little bit more time. But hopefully this is an enjoyable video nonetheless. Oh, and also, really quick announcement, since I never did this in a video before, I have merch. We have Angry Gamer shirts for your gaming sessions, or if you want to spread positive vibes, hugs. We also have coffee cups, water bottles, and lots of stickers, among other things. So what are you waiting for? Check out the link in the description, and check out the full catalog. It wouldn't have been possible without you guys, so thank you so much. But anyways, please enjoy this video. Ultimate Custom Night has the most amount of threats in any Five Nights at Freddy's game ever, having a total of 56 characters. However, if you know anything about Five Nights at Freddy's, you know that there are a lot more characters. So in this video, I'm going to be going over every single character who wasn't included, explain why they maybe weren't included in the first place, and then come up with an idea for what their mechanic would be and how it would affect the overall night and say 50-20. For this video, I will only be covering characters that have appeared in games before Ultimate Custom Night was released, so I won't be covering any characters from the Security Breach era Five Nights at Freddy's. I also won't be covering FNAF World, so sorry about that. But anyways, without further ado, let's get started. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 has a total of 6 characters and 4 of them made it into Ultimate Custom Night. The only 2 characters who didn't make it were Golden Freddy and Endo01. Now, you may be saying that Golden Freddy is an Ultimate Custom Night, and I'm just tripping. However, that is FNAF 2 Golden Freddy, or as he's more well known as, Withered Golden Freddy. Or you might actually just say he is in the game, since you can death coin Golden Freddy at level 1 AI, and Fredbear jump scares you. However, I would view these characters as separate rather than the same character. Golden Freddy from FNAF 1 and Fredbear are different characters. Well, technically, look at the purple hat. However, real nerds will say he appears in the final cutscene. Okay, this is based off them appearing in the game, nerd, not the cutscenes. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's talk about why FNAF 1's Golden Freddy wasn't included. Well, I think this is pretty easy to predict. Since Withered Golden Freddy was included, it wouldn't make much sense to have a second version of Golden Freddy be in the game as well, considering Golden Freddy is just a golden version of normal Freddy. Although, personally I prefer FNAF 1 Golden Freddy's design to Withered Golden Freddy's, but anyway, what am I talking about? Now, for a mechanic, I have an idea or two. FNAF 1 Golden Freddy is most known for his poster on the West Hall corner, and this camera technically exists in Ultimate Custom Night. So, for his mechanic, I decided to try and keep it as close to the original as possible. However, I will be changing it up a tad. So here's the idea. If Golden Freddy spawns in your office, you need to go to the left hall camera and find the Freddy poster. Once you find it, you need to click on it until it turns to Golden Freddy. If you fail to do this in time, you die. I think this is a fun idea, and in terms of how it would affect the 50-20 one, this could make or break your run. Basically, Golden Freddy would just be another Rockstar Bonnie, where you just need to hope he never shows up. I think he would definitely be one of the harder characters for that reason. But overall, the Golden Freddy we got in the game is pretty simple, all things considered. Now, before I move on to the Endo, I actually have one more idea for Golden Freddy's mechanic, and I actually like this one way more. In Ultimate Custom Night, Withered Golden Freddy has a pretty basic mechanic. Whenever he shows up in the office, you can either flip the camera up or put on your mask. So let's make it so that if FNAF 1 Golden Freddy shows up, you have to flip up the cameras, but if it's FNAF 2 Golden Freddy, you need to put on the mask. I like this mechanic a lot more, since it fixes a problem I had with FNAF 2, which is that the mask is just a mindless task that you don't have to think about, and the mask in Ultimate Custom Night is very similar to this. So this would mean that you need to give some more brain power to the situation, and it would make the gameplay a lot more interesting, but in terms would make the game a lot more difficult. Also, to compensate, the kill timer would have to be upped so you don't get unfairly killed in like 1 second. Now onto Endo01, who honestly I can completely understand not being included in this game, since they are just a background character. But for this video, let's give him some love. Now for a mechanic, I want to take his backstage camera render from the first game and make it a bit more interesting. So here's the mechanic. If the camera starts to fill with static, it means that the Endo is starting to stand up, and you need to look at Endo01 on the camera to reset him. If you fail to look at him in a certain amount of time, he will come and kill you. Now, this mechanic would only activate if you're on the camera for a certain amount of time, so you wouldn't get screwed over by quickly flipping up or down the camera. So I feel for 50/20 ones, nothing would really change unless you stay on the camera for a long enough period of time, let's say like 5 seconds. But anyways, that's FNAF 1 done. Let's move on to the next game. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 has the most amount of characters in any Five Nights at Freddy's game to date, well, besides the one that we're covering. But surprisingly, most of the characters are here. Out of the 15 total characters in this game, if you include the Easter egg characters, only 4 aren't actually included. Those characters are Withered Freddy, Withered Foxy, Shadow Freddy, and Endo02. So for this section, we will be having some fun. Let's start with Withered Freddy. Withered Freddy in-game has the same mechanic as everyone else, and isn't very interesting. And considering there's already 3 characters who use the mask in Ultimate Custom Night, it makes sense that not all the Withereds made it in, even though I feel they should have. But let's make him a bit more interesting to have him fit. So here's the idea for the mechanic. Withered Freddy will stick his head out from one of the 2 duct openings, and when he appears, make sure to put on the mask before he kills you. I like this mechanic since it allows the ducks in the room to actually have a use, and with this, I want to go over my idea for Withered Foxy's mechanic, which is a character who 100% should have gotten in the game, and his mechanic is the same as Withered Freddy, except instead of putting on the mask, you would need to flash the duct he's poking his head out of. I think this would make the game a lot more challenging, as you would have to stall Nightmare BB in case he appears on the side of the room that Nightmare BB is on. This would be an evil combo, but one that you could win with careful planning. For Shadow Freddy, for why he isn't in the game? I guess because he's an Easter egg character, although I personally like him more than Shadow Bonnie and I think he needs to be included in more games. For his mechanic, I would make him a secret character just like Shadow Bonnie, but instead of blacking out the office, he would black out the cameras, having his face appear on the camera and making it impossible to see anything. I think this mechanic would honestly not make a difference to experienced players, since the camera's visuals just don't really affect the gameplay all that much. Now for the last character, we have Endo02, another secret character. Now, like Endo01, it makes sense why he wasn't included. And for a mechanic, this was a bit difficult to come up with, but the mechanic I did end up coming up with was quite simple in practice. Endo02 will be crawling through the duct system and will need to be pushed back with the AC. If he makes it to a closed duct opening, he will break it, allowing other characters to make it through. This mechanic is quite simple, but I think it could be effective considering that you mainly use the heater to deal with the duct, and the AC doesn't have much purpose outside of Nightmare Chica. But with that, FNAF 2 is done, and we move on to FNAF 3. Now, for Five Nights at Freddy's 3, there's only really 3 characters, and they are all Phantoms. Phantom Chica, Phantom Puppet, and Phantom Foxy. Now, for why they aren't in the game, it's pretty basic. All the Phantoms in Ultimate Custom Night have different mechanics, and it's hard to come up with different mechanics for 6 different characters. But let's try and come up with some. Let's start with Foxy. Let's make him have the same mechanic as he does in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Phantom Foxy will slowly fade in from either side of the room similar to Phantom Freddy. If you look at the side of the room he's on when he fully appears, he will jump scare you. Phantom Chica will be a simple one. If you see her face on the camera, you need to switch cameras or else she will jump scare you, similar to Phantom BB, so literally exactly the same. Phantom Puppet will be the exact same as Phantom Chica and Phantom BB, except that he will only appear on the Death Coin camera and will do a full 17-second jump scare like in the original game if you fail to switch cameras. Overall, I don't think either of these characters would overall change the game that much. It would just be a minor inconvenience to the overall flow of the night. But there's not much more I could say. Let's move on to the next game.
Was that the bite of 87?
FNAF 4 actually only has 1 character who isn't in the game, and that's Nightmare Foxy. So for Nightmare Foxy's mechanic, we gotta make it interesting, and I think I have a way to do it. I would like to make the idea that certain offices could have custom animatronics, and in this case, we will talk about the FNAF 4 office. In the UCN FNAF 4 office, there is a closet just like in FNAF 4 itself, so let's give Nightmare Foxy the same mechanic as in FNAF 4. Throughout the night, Nightmare Foxy will peek out of the closet and you need to close the door when it does to block him. This mechanic would be very basic, but it would completely change the gameplay as you would have to make sure that you are watching the closet at all times. And with characters like Nightmare On that can block the cursor, this would be a really tricky mechanic to deal with. but I think it would make the office gameplay more interesting. And you could also do the same, like watching the hallway thing, but I don't think that really works for this game as well. And I guess you could also apply it to the other offices, but I don't know, I like the idea of a custom office. But anyways, that's it for FNAF 4. Moving on to the last game on our list. Sister Location has the most number of animatronics who weren't included in the Ultimate Custom Night roster. And here's the list: Funtime Freddy, Yendo, Biddy Bab, Electrobad, and Mini Mina 1. Now, despite the fact that there's a lot more characters, I think that the mechanics they have in Sister Location Custom Night can actually apply to Ultimate Custom Night. So this section is not going to be very large, and this is where the Sister Location section ends, because we're just going to say that the Sister Location Custom Night mechanics are going to flow over to, Ultimate Custom Night. I think it could work quite well. So for Security Breach, there are quite a number of new characters that we get to cover. So let's start with the man, the myth, the legend himself, Glamrock Freddy. Glamrock Freddy in Security Breach is pretty much just a friendly guy, and honestly would fit a character like Rockstar Foxy perfectly. However, I think we can make his mechanic a bit more interesting while also making him an actual threat, unlike Rockstar Foxy. So my idea for the mechanic is this: when you drop the camera, there is a chance that Glamrock Freddy will be in your office in an unrepaired state. Complete the puzzle within 30 seconds or he will jump scare you. If you are successful, then Glamrock Freddy will give you one of Rockstar Foxy's perks at random. I feel like this mechanic would really change the game if added, since while Glamrock Freddy appearing would be very tricky to deal with, unlike Rockstar Foxy, you would be forced to do his puzzle to prevent death, although it wouldn't be that hard by itself. It would just be hard in 50-20 with characters like Nightmare. But the benefits like randomly getting 10 Faz coins could be really beneficial, and depending on how often Glamrock Freddy spawns, you could get 10 Faz coins from him faster than normal coin farming. And in no death coin runs, he could be absolutely essential. So I think he would balance the game out in being a bit harder for new players, but would be massive help for experienced players. But I really like Glamrock Freddy's mechanic, and I think it could be cool. Next, we have Roxy, who is an emotional roller coaster. So I think her mechanic should carry over from Help Wanted 2, where you need to be looking at her when she demands you to. So here's the idea: when you hear Roxy complaining, you have about 15 seconds to find her on the camera, which would be the same as Rockstar Bonnie's guitar cameras, and look at her for 1 second, or else she will jump scare you for not looking at her. I personally think this would make 50-20's main strat completely change, and basically force you to do a no death coin route, as depending on how often Roxy shows up, you could get completely screwed by Toy Freddy intervals, and the plushies by being on the cams for too long. So Roxy would make this game so much harder than it already is, which could be really cool, and I actually think this both fits Roxy's character and makes her super important. It might actually make her the hardest character ever in UCN. But anyways, now we move on to Glamrock Chica, who I think would just be a harder version of Rockstar Chica. Rockstar Chica needs you to have the wet floor sign on the same side as her. However, with Glamrock Chica, I think it would be cool if he had garbage on the opposite side to lure Glamrock Chica to the opposite door. Otherwise, she would just enter for the office to get to the trash and then jump scare you when she sees you. This could be very tricky depending on how fast she moves and how long she waits. As you can see, there is a theme with these characters making the game work harder. Next, we have everyone's favorite gator, Monty. Now, Monty is a bit tricky to come up with a mechanic for, however, I think I have a good idea. Monty will be in the kitchen, and from time to time, he will start trashing the kitchen. When he does this, you need to switch to the kitchen and use the Phaser Blaster, which will be a new item you can use by pressing B. Doing this resets Monty. This is a bit of an iffy mechanic, but I think if it was implemented well, it could once again add a ton of difficulty to the game. And with that, the 4 main animatronics are covered, and now we move on to the other characters, starting with the largest FNAF animatronic ever, I don't count the books, DJ Music Man. Now this character being an Ultimate Custom Night is pretty insane, and honestly I have no idea how I'm going to put this guy into UCN, but let's give it a go. Now, because of how big DJ Music Man is, there's no way that we're going to have him walking around the building. So, here's my idea. Every now and again, you will hear DJ Music Man's epic music slowly creeping in from time to time. When he does, you need to turn up the noise to at least a level 2 or more to make him completely leave. Otherwise, you will die. I find this mechanic isn't that hard, but it would completely contrast normal Music Man who needs you to lower the sound. Then, if you make it that DJ Music Man is angered by a lack of noise, instead of just creeping in from time to time, then you would really have to balance out the sound as to not annoy or upset the other. This could create some really cool moments of tension, although it also could just cancel each other out. Oh, and for how DJ Music Man would actually kill you if he's not in the building, I'd like to think he would just bust the roof in and squash you. Speaking of Music Man, the Mini Music Man is next. For his mechanic, it's pretty easy. It would be like Ballora, where if you hear his music you need to shut the door. However, this time it would either be from the top vent or the side vent, which again would create more variety and more things to worry about, which honestly is one of my favourite mechanics today, as it's all about reaction. Now let's look at the endos, since they would be pretty easy. Basically, my idea is that they would activate at random points and you need to look at them for a certain amount of time to deactivate them. However, personally I don't think the endos should be in the game. And now for the staff bots. This mechanic is super easy to come up with. 100% they are just like trash in the game, where they'll just jump scare you from time to time to distract you. But I mean, what else could they actually do? Now next up, we have Sun and Moon, who are some of the most unique characters in the entire series, having somewhat of a Golem-like interaction between the two. So let's take advantage of this. Here's my idea. Through the night, you will hear Sun/Moon approaching a door. You need to check the camera when they arrive. If it's Sun, leave the door open, and if it's Moon, shut the door. Alternatively, you could have it that instead of looking at a camera, it's a sound cue that determines where they are. This is kind of similar to an idea that I had for Five Nights at Freddy's 2, where putting on the mask for certain characters would actually get you killed, which FNAF 2 Reimagined, an awesome FNAF fan game, did do. But anyways, back on topic. This would be super cool, as it would force players to pay attention instead of mindlessly closing doors. Now we only have a few more characters left, which are mainly the shattered version of the animatronics, so let's just quickly go over them. Shattered Roxy would be super cool if she was the same as normal Roxy, but instead, looking at her causes you to die. Meaning, you would need to make sure that you can tell between her and normal Roxy so you don't die. Like I said, Roxy would be extremely difficult. For Shattered Monty, I would just make him another vent reaction character where if you hear him coming down the vent, you need to shut him out. For Shattered Chica, this is a bit tricky, but I think if she appears in the office, she will start making a ton of noise and you'll need to shoot her with the Phaser Blaster to get her to stop, which is all I can really think of doing. It would just be another noise distraction like Lolbit. And finally, we have the two human characters with Vanny and Burntrap. Well, I guess one human because Burntrap is technically the mimic, but whatever. Starting with Burntrap, his mechanic is really easy to come up with. From time to time, you will hear his corruption sound effect and particles taking over the office. You will need to find him on the camera and burn him with the new burn button, which I guess should be B as well, but whatever. And doing this will stop him. Again, this would force players to not camp a camera, which would make the night way more difficult. Now, last but not least, we have Vanny. Now, since Vanny has so little presence in Security Breach, coming up with a mechanic for her is super tricky. However, I think I have an idea. Let's make it so that Vanny will appear similar to Toy Chica and Toy Bonnie, except you need to put on a new Vanny mask to repel her. If you use the wrong mask for either characters, then you just straight up die immediately. Now yes, I know that another new item is a bit much, but I really like contrasting mechanics to make you have to think, and I think this makes for a more difficult but fun experience overall. And Vanny doesn't have enough presence for me to say anything else, so I don't know, just deal with it. Now that we have covered every single character who is part of the base game, I think it's time that we now switch to every character who is part of the Ruin DLC, as this game has quite a few new characters as well, and technically it's part of Security Breach, so let's get into them. Starting with the Ruin versions of the characters, Ruin Chica, Monty, and Roxy are all honestly difficult to come up with mechanics for, so I'm just going to group them all into one category and give them all the exact same mechanic, since I don't think they're interesting enough on their own. The mechanic is simply when they appear in the office, you need to use, yes, another item, the Phas Wrench, and zap them. Chica will be on the left side of the office, Roxy will be on the right, and Monty will be under the desk. Next up, we have Eclipse, who has a bit more of a role to play. My idea is that Eclipse will appear on either side of the office, and you need to flash them when they enter their moon state. Pretty basic and basically another Nightmare Balloon Boy, but what can you do? And now for the only other real character that Ruin adds, and our last character for today. And that character is the Mimic. While I'm not a huge fan of the Mimic, I think he has huge potential for a really awesome mechanic. And for this, I'm actually going to add Gregory to the roster. I know it's weird, but hear me out. Gregory will attempt to get into your office and ask you to let him in. However, he sounds identical to the Mimic, so when you hear him, whether it's in the ducts, the camera, or the vent, you need to make sure that you are closing out the Mimic while letting Gregory in. If you let the Mimic in, you of course just die. If you don't let Gregory in, he will permanently disable whichever door he is coming from, making you super vulnerable. I think this will completely change the game once again, just like every other character, and I think it really plays on the Mimic part of the Mimic as a character. So let's get started with the Mushroom. And yes, Secret of the Mimic has a Mushroom Man animatronic, and I will be referring to him as Mushroom Man for the rest of this video. So Mushroom Man in the trailer seems to be related to a stealth-like mechanic where you need to hide for him, although that could be the case for all the animatronics. However, I think it would be fine if this character took the cake here and we wrote of this mechanic. So here's the idea for said mechanic. Mushroom Man will from time to time enter the room and stroll across it until he reaches the center of the office, in which case he will look at the player. The player will need to enter the camera when he does this, in order to block out your face entirely, since the mask would have no effect. I think this would be a nice contrast from the mask and would actually make the game a lot more difficult, since, as you know if you ever play Ultimate Custom Night, entering the camera in Ultimate Custom Night tends to be risky. However, it probably wouldn't be that bad overall if you were good at the game. Next up, we have the dog character, who is apparently called Sharpay, like the pen, I guess. But regardless, considering he's meant to resemble a poodle, and poodles, like all dogs, love to be patted and played with, I thought we could actually use this for an idea. From time to time, Sharpay will begin barking, and when he does, you need to find him on the camera and click on them to pat them and calm them down. If you ignore him, he will start getting angry, and if you ignore him for too long, he will just straight up kill the player. This would actually make the entire gameplay loop of 50-20 a lot more difficult, since you wouldn't be able to just camera stall the plushies if Sharpay does not spawn on the cameras the plushies are on. Plus, you are actually spending more time in the camera, which, if you've played the game before, is overall just way more risky. Now, some people may say that we should have used the little wind-up mouse for the dog, but I actually think that we could use it for our next character. The elephant is another very interesting character from Secret of the Mimic, considering that there's only been one other elephant animatronic and it was in this game. I mean, it was in Pizza Sim 2, whatever. And for the mechanic, I think we should use that little wind-up mouse, because elephants are meant to be afraid of mice. I think I read it in a book somewhere. The elephant will appear from one of the two doors, and when he does, you need to click on the wind-up mouse that will be sitting on the desk, and click it in the direction of the elephant, which you can do by right-clicking it. Left-clicking it will send the mouse to the door that it is facing. Make sure the mouse is facing the same way as the elephant in order to properly scare the elephant away from your office. If you send it in the opposite direction, the elephant will enter the room and you will die. This will be a simple mechanic that will require you to look at the doors themselves, so you can't just listen for audio cues or shut them without looking. However, we aren't done with the mouse yet. The White Tiger is for sure the most recognizable character, since he resembles Tiger Rock from the books. And speaking of the books, if we can get this video to 1,000 likes, I'll make a video discussing what if the FNAF book characters were in Ultimate Custom Night. So be sure to like and make sure to subscribe as well so you don't miss that video when it comes out. But anyways, the White Tiger will have the opposite mechanic to the elephant, where instead of sending the mouse towards him, if you see him in the doorway, send the mouse to the opposite side so the tiger will chase after it. If you send the mouse to him, he will catch it and then you'll be left defenseless against the elephant if they arrive. This will be a nice little change of pace so that you won't be mindlessly sending the mouse to whenever you see someone at the doorway. Now, next up, we have the biggest character since Security Breach, the Music Maestro. For why this character exists, who can tell? But we're here to discuss what his UCN mechanic would be, not his lore relevance. And considering that from his jump scare, he seems to like dropping down from the roof, we could incorporate that into his mechanic. So here is the idea. The Music Maestro will act very similar to Music Man, in that the more noise that you make over time, the more angry he will become. However, unlike Music Man, whose anger meter can go down, he will have a permanent anger meter, meaning that any noise that you make will be completely permanent and will not go away. So if you make a lot of noise at the start of the night and then proceed to be quiet, Music Maestro will be angry the entire night. If this gets too high, Music Maestro will burst in through the ceiling and kill the player. which would be very difficult depending on how much progress is actually needed to make him angry. Although this could be really easy to figure out if you just base it off their AI levels, which means that AI level 20 could be very difficult. Our next character goes by the name of Dolly, who is a funny looking animatronic, and for their mechanic, I generally got stuck trying to think of one. But after some time thinking about it and asking some friends, I think I have an idea. Dolly will walk into the room similar to the mushroom, but instead of entering the cams or putting on the mask, you need to stay perfectly still for 1 second, or else you will die. This could be tricky, but I don't think it would do all that much to the gameplay loop if I'm being completely honest. Now, second to last, we have the male bot, who I actually have a really cool idea for. Throughout the game, you collect Faz coins. However, in this version of the game, you can also collect letters in the cameras, and in the office too. From time to time, the mailbot will appear and ask for the mail, in which you need to hand him 5 letters. If you don't do this, he will double the AI of a random animatronic. This would be a very interesting mechanic that wouldn't make the game too much harder, but it could sure make for some interesting situations. Now last, but certainly not least, we have Jackie, who is the star of the show, the Mimic. The one in the I don't even know anymore. But as Jackie is the main character in this game, I think it's best if we give them the most interesting mechanic. And I have an idea for what that could be. Jackie will stomp around the building and attempt to enter the office through any of the 6 entrances. If you hear stomping in the halls, check which hall she's coming from and close the appropriate door. If you shut both doors, she will kill you automatically, meaning you have to check the camera. If you hear banging in the vents, that means she's coming from either the top vent or the side vent. Check the camera and look in the vents to see if you can see her. If you don't see her here, this means that she's coming from the side vent. Again, if you don't check the camera, then you'll just die straight away. If you hear light banging, that would mean that she's coming from the ducts, and you need to shut the appropriate opening. This would make 50-20 extremely difficult, since you need to be checking all the time, but I imagine it would be fun. And before you ask, no, I'm not adding Edwin to the game. I don't want to see any Alright, so here we go guys. Before I end the video, I'm going to cover all the characters that I forgot the first time I made these videos. Starting with the GOAT, JoshuaB. I forgot him last time, but not this time. You've all reminded me enough times, please stop reminding me. Now, JoshuaB I think should behave in a very similar way to JoshuaChica. However, I think instead of JoshuaB appearing at the doors, JoshuaB should instead appear at the 2 vent entrances. And you need to cool the office down and shut both vent entrances, which with JoshuaChica could make this a lot harder. You'd have to shut 4 entrances at once. That would be kind of insane. So now let's move on to Glitchtrap. Glitchtrap is a virus, so I think it would make sense if when he appears he corrupts something. However, I want to make him like the mini Renas, where when he spawns, he slowly corrupts the monitor throughout the night, making it harder and harder to see where everything is. So basically, he will slowly disable your camera visuals, and yeah, you gotta be a bit more careful. Now, our last character that I'm gonna cover is actually Carney, who will be super simple. When he appears in your office, you need to click on a glass bottle that will appear in one of the cameras to knock it over. And you gotta do this within 30 seconds, or you will die. And that is all of the characters. No, I'm not including AR characters or FNAF World characters, because quite frankly, they wouldn't do much. I mean, you could say the FNAF World characters would be Easter eggs, but I don't really know, man, there's too many characters. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys enjoy future videos that I am working on. And trust me, you will like them a lot. Be sure to like and subscribe, go buy some merch, and I'll see you soon.